Yes, great. Good afternoon and welcome back to the Blockchain Venture Day. This is the second session, whose title is The Value of Blockchain. Is crypto the tip of the iceberg?
Right, and I am Rödiger, I'm CTO of BLOXMOVE, and I will be the moderator for this session. So I'm really pleased to welcome all of you for the session. Thank you very much for attending the show. We have Sophia Rödiger, who is a CEO of BLOXMOVE. So good afternoon, Sophia. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. Can you try your microphone?
Sure, we can. I guess now you can hear me, right? Thank you very much for the introduction.
Yeah, thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. In a moment, we also will have Marc, Taverner, who is Executive Director from INATBA, and will join us in a minute. And we will start this session with a talk from Luca Comparini. Luca, you are blockchain practice leader Europe and France for IBM France. So good afternoon, Luca.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, maybe you could, before we get into it, maybe you can introduce yourself and explain a little bit about what is behind your title, practice leader. What is exactly, what keeps you up at night?
Yeah, and especially at day. Obviously, yeah, I'm working in a small startup with 300,000 employees. As you know, IBM, that is present in 170 countries, I believe. And in this small startup, I run the blockchain business at IBM Consulting in France. So France represents pretty much 50 people, 50, dedicated to the French market. And as you can expect, there is a similar organization all over the major markets. Our business and our activity and our mission is to make blockchain real in the enterprise world. So turn ambitions of our clients into solutions ultimately. So we make projects.
Okay, very good. Very good. So yeah, I will leave you the floor for your talk. So stop sharing my screen.
Okay.
You can now share yours.
Yeah, can you see my screen?
It's coming, yes. We can see, you can move in presentation mode.
Yeah, I am in presentation mode. Can you see?
Not really. We can see all your slides on the left.
Okay.
So maybe there's some adjustment to perform.
Yeah, let me try again.
No,
Can you see?
we still see the.
Okay, but can you see?
Yeah, it's
can you see clear?
Big enough. Yeah, it's big enough.
Okay,
it's
cool.
big enough. So yeah, the floor is yours. So we will review your presentation and we'll come back with the panel discussion in about 15 minutes.
Yeah. So I will not to spend too much time. I will not do the 26 slides that you can see here. I just want to do 3 or 4 slides, but I want to start from the title of this presentation, which is crypto the tip of the iceberg? And this is where I want to start. The big disclaimer is that I'm not going to discuss about crypto, not because this is not interesting. Actually, this is ultra interesting and this is really a revolutionary protocol. If we take Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies and public kind of blockchain, in the way they enable peer-to-peer networks to transfer and exchange things of value. But my presentation will be more around how the enterprise world, so namely companies, are embracing the blockchain revolution or evolution, and basically use this technology for business. So this is where I want to spend some time. Now, back to basics, blockchain is the underpinning technology behind several protocols like Bitcoin or other protocols. In simple terms, is a distributed ledger where different participants in a network can have exactly the same view of information. And the main shift in paradigm that blockchain introduces is the fact that we used to work in a world where there are different copies of ledgers. Double entry accounting is the principle that that exists since 1500, and consists in the fact that every participant in the network has his own copy of the ledger with information that concern only his transaction. And blockchain is a radical shift in this concept, as blockchain still is a network technology, but where all the participants in a network can share exactly the same view, and blockchain being a single source of truth. So there is only one ledger. This is the logical view. The physical view is that every participant in a network can have their own copy of the ledger, which magically replicate whenever a new information comes from any participant in the network. Blockchain has several qualities. Obviously, the first one being it is a shared ledger, it is replicated, and it is immutable. So you can use it to tamper information of value, or basically to notarize information of value and make them immutable, so that information become trustable from the network participants that are around the table. Blockchain is non-repudiable, so every information is signed by whoever wrote this information, and every information is timestamped. So basically, back to basic, blockchain is a perfect digital notary of who said what, when, in a network. Okay. Now, why blockchain is being used? Blockchain is being used, in my opinion, for three different things, or at least in the enterprise world, blockchain is used for three pillars. The very first pillar is around the word traceability. Okay, traceability of things obviously involves an element of network, and any supply chain oriented business knows that in a supply chain business you have an element of multi-party process where any asset is where basically the value chain is made of a sequence of interaction between different participants in the same network. If we take an example, which is a very upstream supply chain kind of example, automotive industry is using blockchain to prove the conformity of vehicles in regards to European regulation. So whenever suppliers of an automotive company provide batches of components, this information comes with an element of trust on the fact that these components are or not compliant with a certain regulation. So that when Renault, in this case, assemble the car with the different components, Renault has a real-time view whether the car that is assembling is compliant or not. And this is, in terms of quality, is a way to reduce a lot of cost in the track and trace processes, especially when when you realize that cars are not compliant and you need to recall them. This is a very effective way to save a lot of energies, efforts, and cost when you need to recall non-compliant cars. Another downstream example, so the car manufacturing example was really upstream, so it is about provenance of the asset. This could be probably a more explicit downstream example, which is proving that the distribution of a certain asset has been done according to some rules. Example, that the asset, in this case, a lot of vaccine has been transported and handled respecting the temperature threshold that are necessary to make sure that this asset, the vaccine, is effective when it comes to us. And last, another example on the same on the same supply chain traceability topic, is blockchain being a trustable ledger of information coming from a network. There are some parties in the network, especially the one that owns the brand or own the consumer relationship, that start having the idea of transforming such element of traceability into a way to drive product differentiation and therefore bring to consumers an element of transparency underpinning this traceability. And if you are based in France, there are a lot of products that have been so-called blockchainized, meaning that they have a blockchain-based traceability that can be queried from a consumer app standpoint, and basically the same level of information that are available at the supply chain level can be sourced and can be provided to consumers willing to know where the food comes from and how it's been processed. So as I mentioned, this is the first pillar, multi-party systems, which involve an element of traceability, and especially on supply chain kind of businesses. The second kind of pillar for me is around the word tokenization. You can see the cryptocurrencies obviously as a tokenization kind of topic that is touching the consumers, but you know there is the same kind of momentum touching the enterprise world. And when it comes to tokenization, I see two elements of tokenization. So the first element being the fungible world, fungible being that you can exchange a token with another one of the same type and obviously of the same value, but basically tokens are not unique. And this is the case of coins, cash, securities. And this is where a lot of companies in the capital markets are really seeing the promise of blockchain as a transformative technology for their business. And then you see the second stream is more on the non-fungible tokens. And you probably saw the mediatization of this topic in the market around assets that could be represented by a digital twin in the digital blockchain world. And usually these assets are unique in the sense that could fit very well for luxury, arts, and ultimately collectible kind of goods. You have seen probably the amount of money that has been raised recently by a French company working on NFT, so non-fungible tokens, for football players and fantasy game. You can see the momentum here also by realizing how many other companies are willing to work in this space. So this is the second pillar. Bottom line, on one side, capital market, so central bank digital currencies, digital assets and securities, so mostly banks, custodians, central securities depositories, central banks. On the other side, non-fungible is more media, entertainment, luxury, arts, and whatever comes with an element of uniqueness and scarcity when it comes to digital assets. And the third and last pillar where we are working actively is around the notion of digital identity, decentralized identity, or so-called self-sovereign identity, which is a new concept of how individuals, which you see in this picture are at the center of the page, can get control, can get back an element of control over who manage their identity. So in this system or in this schema, you have 3 points. You can see individuals. They hold their own identity attributes, and they can disclose attribute of their identity to verifiers, so that verifiers can have an element of proof that my identity is eligible to the service they want to provide. But how they can say that my identity is eligible is because the attribute of my identity has been previously provided to me by issuers kind of organization that are trusted third party capable of delivering attribute of identities, signing with their keys, and when individuals provide attribute of identities to verifier, basically there is an element of trust embedded into the proof. Now, I understand this is a very abstract view, but in concrete terms, imagine the COVID pass being delivered under the schema, and this is the case, for instance, in the state of New York. You have issuers kind of organization like laboratories, pharmacies, or whoever can prove that you have a valid vaccine or you have a valid PCR test under validity that can deliver to myself and my smartphone wallet this identity attribute, so that I am vaccinated or I have a valid PCR test. And whenever I go to a restaurant, which in this case is a verifier, the restaurant is asking me a question in a digital form: are you eligible to enter the restaurant? And my wallet can provide restaurant with this element of proof. Now, what is the novelty here? Two elements of novelty. One is that when I'm in the individual, I can just answer the question, yes, I am eligible to enter the restaurant without disclosing any personal information. That's the first element of novelty. And the second element of novelty is that myself as the individual, I am the only one holding my own identity information, and therefore that's changed a lot the current paradigm of companies in the verifier world monetizing my data for providing their services. I believe we can stop here. We will have the opportunity to go through these three pillars, but I want to give you back the word. Thomas.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm not sure your camera is on, so maybe you can. Yes, we can see you. We can see you now. So I will share again my screen to now introduce more in details our panel this afternoon. And I would like now to welcome again Sophia Rödiger, CEO and founder of BLOXMOVE. So good afternoon, Sophia. Could you maybe introduce yourself a little bit more in details and explain to the people in the room what BLOXMOVE is doing?
Sure, I'm happy. So thank you very much, first of all, for having me. My name is Sophia, as you said. I'm CEO of BLOXMOVE. My background is, or my starting point, to be honest, was in psychology. So this is my background from the study perspective. I was always interested in the interface, I would say, or connection between technology, people, and at the end, organizations. This leads me to Daimler, and then I was more than 7 years in the automotive industry, several innovation, digital transformation departments. And since May, as I said, CEO of BLOXMOVE, because we did a management buyout of a technology core element, I would call it, the mobility blockchain platform. This is now the core product of BLOXMOVE. I will tell about that in a minute and also during our discussion. But what is our vision with BLOXMOVE? We apply decentralized technologies and also what we heard from Luca, this concept of digital identities and identifiers into an urban mobility world. And our vision is that we want to connect this fragmented landscape, which we see right now with all the scooter, bike, train, bus companies in one kind of mobility alliance. And what this does mean, I guess we will speak about that in a minute in our dialogue, but maybe this as first intro.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's very interesting to see that you're coming from the psychology, and yeah, that's really an interesting transverse value creation. So, Marc Taverner, I've been told that you are now in the room, so could you switch on your camera, please? You should be able to do that now. Yes. Good afternoon, Marc. Thank you for being with us. So you are the executive director of INATBA. So maybe people here in the room know INATBA very well because it's quite well known from the European organizations. But maybe you could introduce yourself first, explain where do you come from and what INATBA is doing.
Thank you very much, Régis, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everybody. Especially a big hello to all INATBA members. I know some of you have pinged me to tell me that you're on this call, which is very exciting. So my name is indeed Marc Taverner. I lead INATBA, which is a trade association focused on the blockchain industry. We're very proud to say that we have almost 170 companies as members of INATBA. And our primary function is to work at the interface of public and private discussions on blockchain. So many of the topics that Luca was stepping through are very familiar to us, as we spend quite a fair amount of time talking about regulatory, policy, legislative, and other strategic topics that governments have very much at the top of their mind at the moment. And of course, topics that the industry needs to have certainty, clarity, and support on to allow the full value and power of blockchain technologies to be unleashed on all of those examples that Luca was referring to. So, Régis, I'll pause at that point without going too much further into any of the details and hand back to you, sir.
Yeah, that was a very good teaser. Thank you very much. Okay, Luca, now we know you. We will not ask you to introduce you again. Yeah, I wanted to maybe go straight into the discussion with Sophia. Sophia, so what did really caught your attention into Luca's presentation? Where do you see BLOXMOVE into these all three pillars? Maybe you can see yourself into multiple places. So yeah, how do you share the same vision first, and where do you see BLOXMOVE?
Yeah, really good question. And I guess one point I mentioned already, what's really interesting right now and also faced our interest right now is definitely the concept of digital identities and identifiers and how we can give different assets, is it a person, a company, a device, a scooter, a car, whatever, a clear public or private key, so a clear identification. And this is for me really the starting point for all the automated communication between the different devices, assets, people at the end, and companies. And this is also something where I see definitely connections and synergies, and also something what we used in our concept, because at the end, this is a starting point, first of all, more from a value perspective, because we realize or bring the ownership of data back to the right people, I would say, because the person who owns this data and data. And on the other hand, it's really the starting point for totally new journeys and also a kind of roaming. And this is something, for example, what we use also in our concept, that if we see the big picture, then I could imagine we have a kind of, I don't know, maybe mobility wallet on our smartphone, maybe in future it's the watch or whatever, because I guess our children will laugh about us that we have such smartphones always with us. But when we have such a wallet, for example, mobility wallet with the decentralized identity, we can imagine scenarios like I roam from French, for example, from a French city to Germany because I want to visit someone, and I need maybe only my wallet and maybe one app from one provider because this is my local favorite scooter provider, for example, but I can also book the entire mobility in a German city, for example. So this kind of service roaming, which we know right now from data roaming when it comes to our telecommunication contract, for example, this can be something as a big vision which we see in the future. And this is, for example, what BLOXMOVE is also doing or where we are working for. And here I see really was an absolutely interesting impulse which Luca gave, and I see some connections.
Very good. And I understand that you have also a coin, a BLOXMOVE coin. So can you elaborate on how this coin enters into your business model?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Exactly. So the coin is owned for sure by a Singaporean foundation. So it's not the BLOXMOVE coin. This is important to understand from a legal perspective, right? But what we want to achieve with that, or why we did this decision for an own mobility coin, was exactly that we said we need a utility. We need a utility token. If we think that vision in that scenario big, we need something between, and this is important to make one step back and to understand what our distributed ledger can realize. we designed a new concept for B2B settlement. Because now, remember the scenario with all the different providers, tons of scooter, bikes, cars, train companies, they need a very intelligent and efficient way of doing the settlement between each other, right? Especially if we think that seamless journey. Yeah, for example, Luca is booking the entire journey with one app, but at the end you have 3 or 4 different operators in the back end. And now it's important that in real time, all the different companies have the real balance in their sheets, right? And this is exactly what we can organize and really make more efficient in such a blockchain-based world, and here we need the token for shifting the different amounts between the different parties, right? So it's really the most important value is for the B2B settlement, and then at the end, it's also possible to think in the direction of a second utility that also people on the streets, so you and me, can use that token for paying mobility services. And then you can think nice rewarding systems like if you move around in a greener way, for example, so more with shared mobility, more with green mobility, then maybe you get some reward points or some other connections to services you like in a city, for example. And this is something where especially ministries are really interested in. And I see an amazing openness right now from these public institutions to think exactly in this direction. And this is great because, maybe you would not say that public institutions are the first people who think in such innovative and disruptive directions, but it is the reality. It's really nice to see.
Yeah, but this is an interesting incentive, this kind of green mobility, and there must be the incentive must be here with this kind of tokens, and you have kind of impact blockchain at the end. You could name it this way. Okay, very good. So Marc, you mentioned that you have 170 members, so you must see a whole lot of use case and applications. So could you elaborate a little bit more? Again, there are 3 pillars. Do you see more? What are for you the hot topics, the hot applications right now, which are enabled by blockchain, of course?
Sure, thank you, Régis. And to be honest with you, it would be very challenging to add more thoughts than what Luca has already presented and Sophia's just explained as applications. But I just want to call out a few applications from our members that have particularly caught my eye recently. My mind is drawn to COP26, the UN's climate action conference that took place recently in Glasgow. We were fortunate enough as INATBA to have a couple of members presenting some of their use cases and some of their work there. And the social impact work group had presented, I think, a report that covered nearly 80 different applications or use cases of blockchain that would try and create positive social impact. And one of the takeaways from that session, and there were a whole host of different applications that were absolutely wonderful, through from providing clean drinking water in Africa in a way in which communities could own the project and through tokenization could be invested in the project rather than having the profits go out to a third party. And by so doing could increase their knowledge of technology and could be investors in their own water system, all the way through to looking at how social security payments could be better distributed directly from governments to members of their community, to their citizens, in a way that meant more of the funds went directly to the individual rather than going into traditional payment gateways or banking charges. But the one thing that really caught my eye from that particular presentation was a measurement of just how hard it was to judge whether these projects were having impact or not. And this was driven principally by a challenge that there were no established metrics, there were no established standardized approaches to either measure impact or to be able to judge the efficacy of a piece of technology. So the social impact work group, being led by the wonderful chair, Mariana out of IOTA, has begun a process now of trying to standardize an approach, standardize a taxonomy that will look at how social impact can be measured and begin challenging the industry who are working on blockchain-based applications to adopt this standardized approach towards the measurement of the positive impacts they're creating. The other application that really caught my eye was based around non-fungible tokens. And we had one of our other members actually projecting a series of images onto what they call the Armadillo building, which is a very strangely shaped building in Glasgow. And the images they projected represented images of the UN sustainability goals and what their targets for those sustainability goals were. And this particular company created non-fungible tokens out of those images, and then has begun the process of selling those tokens through different exchanges to raise funds that will be put back into the UN sustainability goals. And that particular application, I think, is a good indicator of how this technology can be used not just to create profit, but to support social good, social impact, and developing nations who are trying to pull themselves out of situations where they find themselves less fortunate. I think, Régis, just to conclude my observations, because there are, as you quite rightly say, amongst our 170 members, a multitude of applications, but some of the challenges that we're trying to work with governments on to drive adoption to a very large scale involve a focus on the need for standards and interoperability. So I think Sophia talking about the Green Pass or the COVID certificates is a great example, because for those of us that are fortunate enough to travel at the moment, we go through a very painful process where seemingly we have to present the same information, conduct another PCR test that creates the same set of information that was taken perhaps only 3 hours ago, but enter it into a different form and a different format. And were we able to base this on blockchain and establish an agreed set of standards that were interoperable between different jurisdictions, then we would be able to see the take up of this application. And it's not unique, this challenge around standards and interoperability, just to COVID passes. It has the same challenge baked into identity, which we were just talking about. We're working, for example, on our government advisory body on a big scheme of work being led by the Canadian government to look at self-sovereign identity and digital wallets and how we could build digital credentials in a way that was addressing these standards and interoperability challenges. Because when you build an identity system in one country, it's on blockchain, it's not immediately apparent that another country will accept that identity, even though to us as digital natives, and I know I look old to the audience, but trust me, I am a digital native, it's in our nature now to use these digital tools. Well, guess what? Governments don't play nicely between each other because they haven't got these standards and this level of interoperability built into it. The final two challenges I see are regulatory frameworks. Now, this is as applicable to financial applications built around blockchain as it is around identity. Until there are supportive regulatory frameworks that are realistic, it is going to be hard for businesses in our space to build applications that scale globally, because once again, we will hit upon the barriers of those geographical restrictions, i.e., an application might work very well in one jurisdiction and have regulatory acceptance in one jurisdiction, but it might not be the same in a country that's just next to it. So, for example, France and Germany have a very different treatment of crypto assets until MiCA comes into force. And my final point is around education. And I want to use a metric here that I've just looked at recently, which is that the level of educational skills in the marketplace is a big inhibitor. If we look at the number of blockchain developers, when you go to any of the code repository hubs, you could estimate that the number of blockchain developers globally is probably approximately 1 million or thereabouts. Well, just to give you a yardstick, a comparison, the number of Oracle developers, so just one technology, is approximately 8 million. And that is a measure of where we need to get to as an industry in respect of talent pools, education, and access to individuals who are able to build these wonderful applications. And until we get to that point and focus more on education, I think we're going to struggle to see a really massive adoption. So Régis, I'm sorry, you asked me to give a few examples of use cases, which I did, but as is the want, I'm afraid I went on with a British accented monotone for a little longer than perhaps you hoped.
No, I like the musicality of your accent, no problem. We all like it, in fact. Yeah, you mentioned a lot of things. You mentioned the importance of ownership for NFTs, part of the ownership. I'm sure Sophia is completely, as a philosopher or a psychologist, I'm sure she agrees with you that, in fact, we had this discussion with an impact investor, Bamboo Capital, who just said charity doesn't work. You need to have the ownership. And indeed, this is the incentive again. You also mentioned the importance of standards, interoperabilities. And so, Luca, you are yourself facing this kind of really concrete problem on a daily basis. Do you share the same vision of the need of education and interoperability of data and the need of standards?
200%. We have been working on blockchain since almost 6 years now, and we have been building things, platforms, solution. And my humble view is that there will not be a single platform across the world, but there will be a number of platform, blockchain or not blockchain, right? And the only platform that will exist in the future or will survive in the future are those that will prove to be interconnected and interconnected with legacy system and interoperable between this new platform. 200% agree on this, and I can make so many examples. So the SSI, self-sovereign identity example, is so obvious. I have a pass from France. I want to go to Italy. Obviously, you understand where I'm from, right? From my accent. Likely enough, these two states found a way to agree on an element of standardization and interoperability between my pass and their verifiers. And I mean, I'm not saying this is the future, this is the present. Another example, which also passionates me a lot, central bank digital currencies, right? Which is the regulator-friendly government coins, if you want. So it's not cryptocurrencies, but very similar in the sense that, but they are regulator friendly. When I want to send euro to whoever in Singapore, right, the settlement involves an element of foreign exchange, and interoperability is necessary unless I'm transferring a coin from one point to another. But I believe in the future world, there will be still space for different currencies, not a global currency all across the world. And therefore, interoperability is definitely the most important thing when this new system will emerge.
Okay, very good. Sophia, we started to talk about the impact and the difficulty to measure impact. So I think that at BLOXMOVE you work also on the decarbonization, on the impact on energy. Can you elaborate a bit on what you're doing in this field?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. So on the one hand, right, I pointed a bit more the urban mobility case, right, and why we create impact here is our belief is that many hurdles, or we see that people have issues with changing mobility behavior. And one hurdle is, it's not the only, but one hurdle is definitely the fragmentation, the hassle of, oh my gosh, I need 50,000 different apps when I want to use different services, right? And then I travel to a new city and start again, register and downloading several apps. So this is one reason, and this is our impact, which we try to bring, contribute, and for sure also the problem we solve here. The energy topic you mentioned, there's sustainability. It's a second case which we're focusing right now. It's called sector coupling, where we connect mobility with energy, especially with green energy. And this exactly one future scenario. This is nothing totally new. I guess many of you heard that already, but due to new technology elements in the batteries of the car, or in future also other devices like scooters and so on, we can connect these assets. And again, here we need identifiers and identities. We can connect the assets like a car with the energy grid, right? On later, maybe also our houses and so on. And why is that necessary? Because right now with renewable energy, we have one issue. It's not that easy to switch then on and off, right? Because on a sunny day, you collect tons of energy, or you can produce energy, but on a rainy day, it's not that easy. So often the collection and the demand is not in a balance. And here we use, or the future will use more devices to balancing and leveling the grid, right? Because here's really power and energy and also money behind. Right now we pay tons of money that foreign countries like France, but also Switzerland, taking energy from Germany because they have more hills and can pump water up and down. So it's ridiculous concept, and this is something where we are also working on, and here's pure contribution for a new, as I said, leveling of the energy grids. And the interesting thing is that here we see how blockchain can, or let's call it a shared technology, shared distributed ledger, can connect new industries and create totally new business models based on that. So we believe, and this is one really one strong belief we have, that blockchain will not create an impact for one OEM or one big company or one use case. At the end, it will also be the connection between all the different cases. And this sector coupling is one perfect example for that. And at the end, you have also fleet operators, which really start a totally new role and have impact for the energy sector, right? And this was, maybe never accepted in the past, or thought that this will happen in the past. And now we see, as I said, that totally new strategic partnerships are possible.
Okay, we talked a little bit about traceability. I wanted to discuss about circularity with traceability, but we cannot really do that right now. Luca, I have this question on traceability. In fact, it's multi-party. So who is paying what in this landscape? Because the car manufacturer will want his supplier to adopt blockchain, and then they will have to adopt and pay a service that they haven't chosen. How does it work? Where do you see? How do you see that happen?
Yeah, the question for me is more who is incentivized for providing the data. Because it's in the B2B world is not about paying tokens to support the platform, but it's more because the motivator for parties sitting around the same table comes from is basically extrinsic of the platform. So it's basically comes from the use case and the business case around the use case. So in the car manufacturer case, there is a mutual interest in the car manufacturer and in the suppliers to have a more precise view and real-time view of whether a certain component is compliant or not, because the cost of non-compliance is basically paid by the car manufacturer, which has the biggest incentive to move, but is basically pushed back to the supplier as penalties, and therefore they also have an incentive to play the game. So I believe, if I had to resume in very short terms, business case or use cases that work are use cases where all the participants in the network have a natural incentive to be part of the game, right? Okay. Yeah.
We saw that with Sophia just a moment ago, and the incentive is really part of the equation for the monetization of the software, of the blockchain service. Okay, I wanted to open the discussion a little bit on the hype cycle for blockchain 2021. So everyone is maybe familiar with this hype cycle. This is a concept which is from Gartner, and every now and then they publish this hype cycle. So a new technology enters into a very big hype. When you're at the top of the hype, everyone is working on that, and then the more you learn, the more you can maybe lose interest on the technology because you have identified some issues, and then you will learn more, and then you will identify the true value, and we reach what is called the plateau. And here, the good news is that although the technologies which are here, none are in red or in yellow, so none will be abandoned before the plateau, or none will take more than 10 years. We are still between, let's say, 2 to 5 years for the light blue, and the blue is 5 to 10 years. Reaching the plateau means that you have reached you have already the early majority of adopted. So blockchain is, so what do you think about this? And this is a question to all of you, Marc, Luca, or Sophia. What do you think of this curve? I see that there are a lot of technologies which are correlated, of course, but some are, for example, decentralized exchanges here is 2 to 5 years and could be on the plateau before technologies like, I don't know, blockchain platform as a service. So do you agree with this curve? Of course, between 2 to 5 years can take forever. So yeah, I'm not targeting anyone in particular. Who wants to share his vision here?
I guess I can go first, if you want.
Yeah, Luca.
You know, we can consider several things here. So first, blockchain platform are in the throes of disillusionment, which is a good thing for me. You know, we love when things are close to plateau productivity, because this is where the real fun is. You know, this is where the complexity is, making things real in a production environment. And this is basically my pillar number one. It takes time because most of the blockchain platforms at scale require an element of adoption, and adoption in the ecosystem, the adoption that generates the network effect takes time. You know, you can imagine the complexity of putting several competitors or partners around the same table. You know, political dimension, technical governance, beyond just the technicalities. Second thing, the NFT, stablecoin, decentralized identity on the top of peak of inflated expectation. Again, this is a very good news for all of us, because it means that very soon they will become mainstream, and this is really what I believe. You know, but and this is the third element of my talk, is blockchain is basically plumbing, is an infrastructure play. So infrastructure play being things that are difficult to insert in ecosystems because they touch the ground and the foundation. But two, the good news is that infrastructure play are there to stay, because the same efforts you need to come with a new infrastructure is basically the same effort to replace the same infrastructure with a newer one. So basically, these are very long-term shot, and yeah, I'm personally very excited about the level of maturity I see on the market. And in my opinion, what is really still very embryonic in the sense that it must be shaped, and the vision and the business case and the way it moves forward must be really shaped, is the decentralized identity. Because, you know, as you can see in the chat, people tend to be scared when some companies do things with data. But at the same time, you know, if you look at the way companies provide services, most likely for free, they use the data to provide as a counterpart for providing services for free. And this change in paradigm. So the fact that companies will not be able anymore to use data, to monetize data, to provide free services, will change radically most of our, most of our ecosystems. And this is a transformation that I believe will take some time.
Mm-hmm. And Sophia, do you want to react yourself on this curve? Where do you see yourself? Do you agree with timings which are here? Do you see the market booming?
Mm-hmm. I mean, at the end, I like that especially Gardner is really trying to bring that in a kind of concept, right? But at the end, we see that reality is not that easy, and that you have really loops and changes, and everything is crossed and interlinked. So this is one statement maybe for that. I would agree what Luca said, and especially that we are right now, and here I see it with blockchain platforms and also protocol or platform as a service, that we are really in a low curve in the disillusion. And I think that's good, exactly what also Luca said. I see us here. This is exactly the phase. We are a platform, we are protocol as a service, but we see definitely the shift that there's a high interest and not a fear in that topic. So with all the providers, which we talk about, the technology, also about the concept of decentralization and a new structural element in it, that there's more an openness right now to think in that direction. Say, yes, we have no clue where we end at in our project, but we are open to design something where we really share resources, where we have new contracts in it and so on. So this is a positive thing. And at the end, yeah, it is tricky with blockchain because I think it is not that easy to understand, right? As Luca said, it is backend, and backend is for most of the people quite hard to understand, to feel. It's not really tangible, right? And therefore, I guess it's not that easy to explain that to people. Maybe not that easy as we have seen with the internet, because if we ask people if they understand the internet, they will also say no. But we learned due to apps, we learned how to use that, right? And made it very easy to use the internet or social media for people. I think this is the important point for blockchain. We have to find the cases where more and more people, also mainstream usage is possible. And I think we are really quite, also I would agree what Luca said, quite, in a good speed and mode right now to identify that. So, and we could really convince our partners that they have more efficiency, that they have clear value with our technology. And if we speak more and more about this real use cases, this real life use cases, I think, and here it leads back to what Marc said with education, that this is then the main point of a new, I would say, dynamic for the entire area.
Thank you. Marc, any conclusive remarks for this discussion? Anything caught your attention?
Yes, thank you, Régis, and sorry for going off camera. I'm going from my phone, so I had to put my glasses on and make the screen bigger. I'm a very old digital native. Look, I've got a couple of remarks about this. Nothing in here frightens me tremendously. I do think blockchain has been overhyped, and in a way, I'm thankful that we had the restrictions in movement, because it kind of slowed down the number of conferences that were taking place and forced people to focus on creating value, building real applications, and demonstrating progress through applications rather than PowerPoint presentations on stage. I would be super interested to see a hype cycle for blockchain applications, because to the point that both Luca and Sophia have spoken to, this is a hype cycle where we're looking at the plumbing, we're looking at the foundation. And we didn't look at the internet in this way. For example, nobody really looked at the internet and said, well, are the telco providers at, what stage of the hype cycle are the telco providers at? When will TCP/IP be restricted from license and be accepted by everyone? We didn't plot that, at least to the best of my memory. We started talking about things such as shops being built on the internet, media outlets being built on the internet, real use cases. And I would be super interested to see a use case, similar hype cycle, because I firmly believe that some of these points on this hype cycle are a little meaningless at the moment, unless you can put into context the application. So, for example, smart contracts. Well, smart contract could be anywhere on that cycle, depending on what you want to use it for. If you want to use it to represent, I don't know, say, for example, a real world physical item, then we're a long way off being too far down the hype cycle, because there are all sorts of legal issues to do with the enforceability of smart contracts. But if you're talking about smart contracts in a closed system, up and down a supply chain with known actors, which is kind of the point that Luca was making with one of their use cases in supply chain earlier, then I think we're a lot further forwards. So for me, it's all about use cases, which Sophia alluded to. And I think as an industry, we spoke more about the use cases, the value that's being created for users, then we might help with education. At the moment, and I'll finish up with this thought, Regis, it's like, it's almost as if we are selling light bulbs, but we're trying to educate the world in its entirety about electricity generation, distribution, as well as, you know, standard power contract purchase agreements, when in actual fact we should be talking about the value of a light bulb, the lifespan of a light bulb, and how much light it can give you.
So we're going to put an NFT on this webinar so that we can call this new hype cycle, the Taverner hype cycle, if you don't mind. And yeah, you're going to make a fortune. Okay, so we are reaching the end of this session. Thank you to Peter for your comment. We've seen your comment on the hype cycle on cybersecurity. It's a very valuable comment. The room has been really quiet. I was hoping to take some questions from the room, but I think we're going to move to the next session now. We only have 2 minutes, so maybe just what is your next move? Where can we meet you? Any place where we can contact you? Sophia, Luca, Marc, Sophia?
For sure. So first of all, on social media. So we're really happy, and I will share in exactly that moment my links. So follow us and let's have a dialogue and conversation via LinkedIn, for example, right? So we're really happy. This was a short chat between us, but let's really continue with the dialogue. Events, for sure, it's virtually, and it will stay virtually in the next months, I would say. We have to deal with that due to the pandemic. But yeah, let's stay in contact, I would say, via social media, first of all. Thank you very much for having this and organizing that session here.
Yeah, thank you for your value in this panel. So Luca, thank you very much you for your presentation. You are really a strong believer, but also in blockchain, but I'm understanding the real world. So I've seen you've shared your LinkedIn profile. So lots of the companies that we have been talking to, either in SIF Lab for the self-sovereign identity or for Ledger, we're interested to discuss with IBM, especially on self-sovereign identity. So if you allow me, I will make the connection. And Marc, where can we reach you if we want to become a member of INATBA? Because I want to be
thank you. Thank you, Regis. We welcome everybody. You can find us at inatba.org, INATBA.org. And all of the topics that we've mentioned today, not least of which e-identity and e-IDAS, we're actively working on at the moment. I know we have a few members on this call, so come join them, come make a difference, come and help us drive blockchain to the next level.
Yeah, there's a real vision for impact as well, so that's very important. So thank you again for your contribution to this panel.